I'm gonna act up. I'ma need you to back up. I'ma need you to back up. Yep. I'ma need you to back up. Spilling the tea, you stirring the cup. I'ma need you to back up. I'ma need you to back up. Yep.
Hello and yes, welcome. My name is Jason Schwab. I am a producer at RestaurantSpaces and this is Disrupt. It is our third episode. Thank you for joining us as you all flood in and see this today. But what is Disrupt? Well, Disrupt is our little LinkedIn live show produced by RestaurantSpaces. And what do? Well, we go out and we search for people who are doing innovative things in the restaurant space, people who are designing, building, rolling out restaurants. And we twist their arm enough until they decide to come on to here and agree to this. And we have a chat with them for 20 minutes. We find out what they're up to, how they're thinking about the future, and then maybe you can take some of what they said and that might get you to, inspire some different thinking in how you do your thing. And we have a great guest on today, really excited to introduce him. His name is Benjamin Calleja. He is the CEO of Livit Design. And I'm sure there are a handful of you at least out there who are aware of Livit. They are a design and consultancy firm that's based out of Europe, but they do work worldwide. Some of you have probably worked with them, who knows? And they do really, really cool things. In fact, that's how Ben came up on our radar in the first place. Livit was rolling out these lab restaurants where they were cramming them full of technology to help improve the guest experience, help push up sales, really cool out there technology. And Ben has been a big hit whenever we've had him along at RestaurantSpaces. And, really excited to see what he's been up to, what the team's been up to in amongst all this disruption and chaos of the last year. So let's jump straight into it. Let's bring Ben live right on. Hello, Ben. Are you there?
I am here. Hello from Stockholm.
Welcome from Stockholm. Thank you so much for joining Disrupt. Ben, it's been a bit of a crazy year, as everybody knows and you know. Before this happened, though, you were someone who I knew as someone who was a real big jet setter. How many flights would you take a year before COVID went down?
I used to take like 300 long-haul flights a year. We are in 50 countries and the world is just very big. So it's been definitely a change, being grounded for a few months, and I've actually enjoyed it a lot for a change. And I've taken the opportunity to build a new house. We're actually, as you can see in the background, we're moving tomorrow. So we're all ready.
Congratulations. Well, you spent the time building a house. What have I done? Well, look, hopefully you're back to taking flights again soon, and the rest of us are as well. But look, before we jump into it, Ben, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are familiar with Livit, but for those of you who aren't really familiar, I'm just going to get Ben. Ben, can you just run us through what you guys are, what you do, and I'm going to give you just 42 seconds to explain it.
Yeah, more than enough. So Livit is the world's largest restaurant design company. As I mentioned, we are in almost all over the world, 50 countries. We open a restaurant every 8 hours somewhere in the world. I guess we've done somewhere between 12,000 and 13,000 restaurants by now. And we're a strange animal because it's everything from strategy to operational efficiency, technology, yes, the front of house design, sourcing, and everything in between. And not only that, we're also operators. As you mentioned, Jason, we have our own restaurant labs where we innovate and kind of try to push the industry forward and, help others and inspire. I think that's really what drives me, at least, right?
Yeah, perfect explanation. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely what you guys do. And people love hearing you speak at RestaurantSpaces and the stuff you're up to in your restaurant labs, which I do want to touch on in a little bit. But before we do, apart from not catching flights as regularly as you used to, what's this last year been like for you? The last time we saw you was at RestaurantSpaces last year, right on the eve of COVID. So what happened after that for Livit and what have you been up to?
Well, I think it's been a very, very fascinating year, I would say. It was super interesting. We've learned a lot. And in the beginning, I'm I'm a restaurant investor, I'm a restaurant operator, I'm a restaurant designer, all the eggs in one basket. So super concerned with, the whole world stopped. And curiously enough, it took like just 3, 4, 5 weeks after the lockdowns, and we were bombarded by clients that needed to innovate and to become digital and to go off premise and to be more efficient with labor, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been, in the 22 years that we've been operating this business, it's been our busiest year ever. So definitely a roller coaster, and a lot of things have happened. And just what I would say was very interesting was to see how different parts of the world have reacted, not only to COVID and the pandemic, but specifically our industry, how nimble we've been, how we've adapted, how different geographies, different target audiences, different demographics have adapted over these last few months. And there's a lot of very interesting learnings there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looked great to hear that, out of this disruption and mayhem, it's been such a good year for you. And obviously the industry has really needed it. So I'm curious, Ben, what kind of requests have your partner brands been coming to you with? What's the kind of work that you're involved in, and what solutions are you needing to find for them right now through this period?
Yeah, I think what COVID has done is not really change a lot, it's accelerated a lot. So a lot of the things, as you know, when we were in RestaurantSpaces in last year, we were talking about, the increase in labor, and now there's shortage of labor as markets reopen, need for efficiency, technology, all these things have been radically accelerated with COVID. So what really happened is that a lot of brands were thinking of doing things, but life was okay, so they kind of not needed to do it. And suddenly, overnight, they were all forced to do it. So most of the requests we're actually getting is operational efficiency. How to manage both low volume sales for a number of units, or the contrary. Some of our clients are doing the best years ever, and year-on-year sales are through the roof. So really how to cope with throughput, how to implement new technology, how to really maximize revenue ultimately. As you know, we work mostly with private equity. So when investors put their money behind the brand, they really want to get that maximized return on invested capital. And that's what we do. So I would say there's this 2 buckets, right? Either how do I manage my lower volumes and still become profitable, or how do I cope with high turnover and high top line sales? And the overarching theme, I would say, is labor. I'm calling in from Stockholm, where we're paying $28 an hour. It's almost, when we speak to our US clients, it's like we come from the future, right? Because not a lot of industries know that their main cost is going to, keep increasing 10% for the next few years. So understanding that industry and helping out with solutions, that's really been the biggest chunk of what we do.
Yeah, I definitely want to jump into that, the efficiency piece there, especially where it intersects with the need to do that for the labor problems everyone's having right now. But I just want to say to everyone out there who might be watching, feel free to please add in some comments, some questions in the comments section, and we're going to get to your questions towards the end of this today. But yeah, let's focus on that, Ben, because obviously, especially in the US, with the way that the labor market is happening and the surplus, there's just less labor, obviously, that's happening, that's available for restaurants at the moment in the US. So can you dig into the nuts and bolts of what kind of solutions you're finding, either front of house and back of house, to help with the labor situation in restaurants?
Yeah, so I think that there's both a cultural change and a back of the house or teamwork structure that's really interesting that we've seen, especially in high labor markets, right? So the biggest underlying disruption in this industry is breaking down the hierarchies. So specifically in the US, as you say, this industry is very traditional. It's very hierarchical. You have the general manager, you have the assistant managers, you have your mixologists, you have your head chefs, sous chefs, runners, servers, dishwashers, right? And once you've stepped up, you never walk down, right? When you go from a runner to a server, you only want to move upwards. And what we've seen is that that creates works in silos and less efficiency. So we've tested a lot, and for quite some time, eliminating hierarchies and creating structures where everyone is cross-trained and does everything. And the pandemic has actually helped us in this, where some brands, the chefs needed to be delivery drivers because that's what was needed, right? And you start to work almost like a family business again. And the businesses where we've implemented this type of change, my favorite metric in this industry is guest per labor hour. How many guests can you serve with one labor hour? And that's really where we measure a lot of the success and the return of that investment. So you can actually pay more the more cross-trained team members are. So one of the things we do a lot is, incentivize training. So the more stations you are skilled at, the more money you can actually make. So there's a win for the company, but also win for the employee, because specifically on non-peak hours, you don't want to have a restaurant where you have a host, you have a bartender, you have a chef, you have just waiting for guests to come in. And suddenly just to open the door, you have 10 people or 10 employees. But how do you manage? A good example is our restaurant lab here in Stockholm, where we were able, in the middle of the pandemic, where we only served like 100 guests a day, we were able to run the whole restaurant with 2 team members, right? 13 labor hours in total. So pushing the limits of how restaurants are traditionally operated have shown great results in not only these times, but I think it's been more challenging for a lot of brands and therefore more helpful.
Yeah, really interesting what you're talking about there in terms of breaking down the old way we used to do things, having it be a hierarchy. And that flexibility is, I think, just a real cornerstone of what needs to happen in the restaurant industry moving forward. And you mentioned your lab in Stockholm as well. I wanted to bring that up because we actually visited your lab in LA last year, and I know you were putting a lot of that into action there already, running the restaurant with lower amounts of staff and finding efficiencies there to be able to do that. Are you playing with the tech side of things in terms of automation, whether it be in back of house or in front of house, to be able to enable that to happen? And have you had any more insights with any tech on that front?
Yeah, so there's two sides to this. First is the guest facing side, right? And I think we've all heard the term frictionless or seamless experiences, etc. But this is really interesting. So at our V restaurant, basically you and I, we could be in a meeting, we place our order, we don't tell the restaurant where we're coming. The moment we walk through the door, we break the geofence, our order is automatically triggered to the kitchen. We can sit wherever we want, and with an accuracy of 1 inch, we know where you're sitting. So we can even identify on which side of the table you're sitting. Within 5 minutes, food and drinks is on the table. And whenever we're ready, we just walk out. And when we break the geofence again, it's like an Uber experience. How was your experience? Do you want to rate us? Do you want to tip? So really being in control of your experience as a guest is enabled by technology. And you need to do quite a few integrations, but it's perfectly possible. It's not expensive at all. So you can create that ultimate guest experience where you're not pushing a guest. If they want to stay for 3 hours and order 7 rounds of drinks, they're more than welcome to do so. But if you want a quick in and out and don't want to talk to anyone, you could do that. Actually, in our Swedish location, we even have it outdoors. So we have antennas on the facade of the building. So you can just walk up to the patio, sit, food arrives, and when you're ready, you just leave. You don't have to talk to anyone. So that type of technology is something that we are seeing more and more. And not only because it was interesting before COVID, when you and I spoke last, but because it's also contactless and it's helped with all those things as well. And the second part is the technology on the back of the house. How do we create technology that enables true hospitality? Our industry is still about people. Technology is not here to take away people, but to make their lives easier. So if we automatically control the light and the sound and the scent and the environmental, so our team members can really focus on true hospitality. And that's also important. How do we use technology to take out all the boring stuff so they can do the fun things?
Yeah, and I like that focus on people because that's where the argument usually runs into. It's kind of sacrificing one or the other. But your restaurant's really good at, if I could use for lack of a better term, kind of invisible technology. You mentioned a few things there, pumping scents into the restaurant like basil to improve your salad sales, and you've got a partnership with Spotify, which of course helps you to optimize the music that's been played in a space. depending on the time of day, which has a direct impact on sales as well. Wondering, and if we could just play a few images there, Laura, just of the restaurant that you have in LA. I'm wondering, Ben, just as we look through these, what other crazy things are you imagining?
Well, I think what's really interesting is not just the environmental controls, it's what it does to human behavior and to guest behavior and what can be done to drive sales. Because a lot of the things we all know, music is good, scents are good, but how do we actually use those to change behaviors and ultimately drive sales? That's really what fascinates us, and that's what we try a lot. So ultimately, creating algorithms that in real time measure how many people are in the restaurant and therefore change the mood. So the managers don't have to think about what music you're having, if you're on peak, if you're not on peak, what is the scent intensity, what is the energy levels that you want. All these things should happen behind the scenes. I'm a big fan of technology, but I think technology should not be between the guest and the brand, because we're still a people's business. It's still hospitality. But a lot of technology could be behind the scenes and really create better experiences. And, computers are better at some things, but humans are better at others. So it's like, what are we really good at and how can we focus on those? And then just push everything else to the tech side.
Well, we're certainly excited to see what you come up with next in the future to influence human behavior and do it in a human way as well. And for those of you who are interested in learning more about this side of what Livit does and the things that they think up, we're just going to throw a link up there to Ben's last talk from RestaurantSpaces, so you can dive into that a bit more. I'm also interested, Ben, though, in terms what else you're doing apart from all of that. I know I spoke to you just briefly the other day, and you mentioned you modifying, especially back of house, to make restaurants more flexible in terms of the real estate that they can be using. I know you're experimenting with that at the moment. Can you run us through what you've got in the mix there?
Yeah, so there's an interesting thing happening in the market with the death of retail, right? A lot of retail stores are closing. You can go to Fifth Avenue in New York and see, corner locations close, and that never happened before. So there's a huge opportunity for restaurants in the retail real estate, but a lot of retail units are not prepared. They don't have exhaust, or they don't have grease traps. So we're now creating a new lab where we're going to test, how much can we push the boundaries in terms of ventless, and really making sure that we can create, a high culinary experience with high grade of service, great experiences, but in ventless locations. So basically, we could take advantage, and our clients can take advantage of lower real estate costs and lower rents, and therefore have higher returns on those premises, but also be able to access locations that before were off limits. So we're not only designing specific equipment in-house, but we're really playing with what can be done in terms of technology and equipment to access that real estate that is available globally. And it's not just a US trend, we're seeing this all over the world. So within this year, we hope to be able to have at least 1 or 2 units, test units open in terms of that. And that goes not only for, traditional restaurants with front of the house, but also, virtual brands, cloud kitchens, etc. Because if you crack that code, then the scalability is just immense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up just there at the end. And I wonder if we can briefly touch on that before we jump to some audience questions. You are also doing work with brands, helping them roll out their own virtual brands using their existing kitchen space. We had Jeff Alexander from WowBow on a couple of weeks ago talking about their strategy doing this. And now I think you said to me it's roughly about 20% of what you're doing with your clients. Wondering, what are your thoughts on how the virtual restaurant branding is going to sort of play out in the next few years? And do you think this is something that restaurants need to be really getting on board with now?
Absolutely. I think it's here to stay. It's not here to substitute the traditional industry. It's here to complement it. So it's another player. I think 2 things that we as an industry need to think. Competition might not come from other operators, might come from the sites. Our competitors might be new brands coming from influencers or for, all sorts of other industries. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, understanding the whole ecosystem, because I see a lot of fragmentation. You have the third-party delivery companies, and then you have the app companies, and then you have the virtual brands, and then you have the kitchens, and one thing that is important is IP, right? Nowadays, the physical assets, opening a restaurant or opening a kitchen, anyone can do it. You can open 100 kitchens overnight if you want. So the asset is not what is important. The IP is what is important. So the importance in company valuations in IP is going to be much more important in the years to come. And then the second thing is scalability, right? The speed of scalability and ownership of verticals. So we are now working both in Asia and in Europe with some very interesting companies trying to own everything, right? Owning the client, owning the delivery, owning the food, owning the brands. And that's something new, up till now, we've seen a lot of fragmentation. You play in one of the silos, but there's some real big money going behind some interesting companies in, creating the whole ecosystem and owning the guest experience, even in a virtual space or in a dark kitchen space, from order to delivery of the food.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts there, and that's a really exciting corner of the industry. So looking forward to seeing how it plays out in the years to come. But Ben, I'm going to throw in some audience questions now, if I may. Just have one coming from Melissa Ng, who is from Carver and also a guest on our show last week. Thank you, Melissa. And she asks, you mentioned the different reactions across the restaurant industry to the pandemic across the world, but have you seen anything that's been consistent globally?
The comeback, I would say, and it's very exciting. It really makes me happy to talk about this, because there's a lot of pent-up demand. No matter where in the world, when we see that restaurants are reopening, we see spikes in sales, 20, 30, 40, 50% to 2019 sales. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And even if, I spoke to a Canadian friend that they're going through a lockdowns now. When markets reopen, there's a lot of pent-up demand. We are still social animals, and we really are longing to get out and meet with friends and have fun again.
Yeah, we've been running roundtables digitally with the restaurant industry, and that's definitely something that everyone's really, really pumped for. Thank you for that question, Melissa, and thank you for answering it, Ben. And we're nearly at the end of our time here, Ben, but I do have just one last little segment, and it's a segment that I call the bouncer. Are you familiar with the game of cricket at all, Ben?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. A bouncer is basically the cricket version of a curveball in baseball. And I'm going to throw one at you now. I'm sure you understand the metaphorical meaning of it. You ready for a bouncer question?
I am.
Okay, great. Ben, we've had you come speak at RestaurantSpaces a lot. We then take your talk, we put it up on YouTube, and it always gets thousands of views. For instance, here's one here. We've got, there we go, like 9,500 views. Here's another one, several thousand views. Here's what we normally get on our YouTube videos, Ben. 75 views, Ben. 70. What's your secret? Why does everyone want to hear from you? Why are you so popular? How do we do it?
I don't know. You do great videos, but one thing that it's just very fun. I had a chat with one of the world's largest hotel companies, and the COO said, "Hey Ben, I didn't want to tell you this, but I got the RestaurantSpaces video sent to me by 4 different team members." So it's definitely gone viral. I think the secret is just doing things differently and trying to push and inspire. And as a consultant, I think it's easy to go and say, you should do this, you should do that. I think what we are doing in terms of doing it ourselves and then sharing it with the industry is something very unique, and I think hopefully inspiring to others.
Well, I'm sure it is. Well, the views kind of speak for themselves. I'm not jealous at all. Well, I got another bouncer question for you, Ben, just as we wrap up here. And that is, what's something that really peeves you? What's your main peeve about the restaurant industry? Well, is there something that you're seeing, or maybe you're not seeing, that kind of pisses you off about what's happening in the restaurant industry?
One of the things that frustrates me is lack of speed and innovation. a lot of very large companies, and I get it. They're very large, franchise-based, but there's a lack of speed. There's a few players out there that really disrupt, that change things, but the vast majority of the industry is a dinosaur. And it's actually good, right? Because there's a lot of opportunity with that. But I would really like to see some more innovation and some more speed in innovation that we can see from other industries that we don't see in ours.
Well, thankfully, we've got players like you to help speed things along and turn the dinosaurs into fuel for the future. So that was super corny. That just came off the top of my head. I can't believe I did that. Ben, thank you so much. We're all out of time on Disrupt today. Thank you for joining us, and can't wait to hear from you next. But before you go, actually, you haven't been jet setting very often lately, where we're actually making a return to live events in October. What do you say? Is there a possibility that you might be able to come and speak and get some more YouTube videos in October?
Always count me in.
That's what I like to hear. Ben, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Have a great one.
Yeah, you too. Thank you, Ben. And thank you all of you for tuning in. Thanks. That is episode 3 of Disrupt. Thanks for joining us. But before you go, I do want to tell you who we have on next week. And before I do that, I actually want to tell you about return to our live event that I just mentioned. We are back. RestaurantSpaces, after more than a year of not actually being able to have the event on, we are going to be making a return to the live event in October, 17th to 19th, happening in Palm Springs. Really, really would like you to have you there. We're going to place a link to our website so you can request an invite there, just in the comments section. So head there, find out about the event, and you can request an invite. We are going to be announcing our lineup really soon. We're also going to be launching our new website, our shiny brand new website. So keep an eye and an ear out for any developments on that front. And hey, hopefully we can see you in Palm Springs in October. And one last thing before you go, our guest for next week. Next week, we're going to be chatting with Justin Rosenberg, who is the founder and CEO of Honeygrow. Really cool concept. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with doing things with technology, thinking ahead. Really excited to hear what Justin has for us next week. And make sure you go away. If you like what we're doing at Disrupt, tell your friends, tell your people, tell your colleagues, get them to tune in. Every Thursday, we're doing this 1 p.m. Eastern right here on LinkedIn. And that is it from me and Laura, who's producing in the back end. We'll see you next week on Disrupt.
And then the 7, I'm gonna act up. I'ma need you to back up.